Here's what's coming up on the world today. UK removes Nigeria, 10 other African countries from red list. Belarus opposition leader Sergei Tikhanovsky jailed for 18 years over mass protests. Plus at least 50 people killed in fuel tanker explosion in northern Haiti. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shuboale. Following widespread criticism over its travel red list, the UK government has announced that all 11 countries will be removed from the list from 4 a.m. on Wednesday. This includes Nigeria, Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe. The red list was reintroduced in late November as a precaution after the emergence of the Omicron variant. But Health Secretary Sajid Javid says it had spread so widely the rules no longer have much purpose. Currently, all UK arrivals from red list countries must pay for and self-isolate in a pre-booked government-approved hotel for 10 days.
Community transmission of Omicron in the UK, and Omicron has spread so widely across the world. The travel red list is now less effective in slowing the incursion of Omicron from abroad. So I can announce today that whilst we'll maintain our temporary testing measures for international travel, we will be removing all 11 countries from the travel red list effective from 4 a.m. tomorrow morning.
I thank the Secretary of State for being so generous.
Well, our correspondent in London, Juliana Olayinka, joins us now for more. Juliana, this has come in less than a month since the red list was reintroduced. The government had defended the move, blaming it on science. So what changed? Why the swift turnaround? Well, it does seem we're having some connections with our correspondent. We will try and reconnect to get that discussion going on. But in the meantime, still in the UK, the Health Security Agency's Chief Medical Advisor, Susan Hopkins, says the Omicron variant of the coronavirus is showing a higher rate of reinfection than that other variants, and its growth rate is shortening in the country. She says infection from one variant of coronavirus should protect against severe disease from another variant, but it may not protect against mild disease or from transmission of the virus.
We have been studying this virus for 3 weeks today, and in that time period we have shown that in the UK that this is growing very fast, with a growth rate of initially 2 to 3 days, and that growth rate seems to be shortening rather than lengthening at the moment. We've also shown that the virus in the laboratory does not neutralize, is not effectively neutralized by people who've had vaccine or have had prior infection compared to other variants. And we released vaccine data on Friday evening to show that after 12 weeks after your initial vaccine and before you've had a booster, your risk of acquiring this infection, at least mild disease in community, is very, very low, much, much lower than we've ever seen before. We currently have 10 individuals who are admitted to hospital with a diagnosis of Omicron before or on the day of admission. We're watching those numbers very, very carefully, and we do not have enough individuals in hospital in this country to be able to give an understanding of severity. We would hope that the vaccine high uptake that we have will make the severity of this less than we've seen in previous waves that we've had. But we are concerned with the large volume of individuals who are being infected every day in the population, that we are going to have a very difficult 4 weeks ahead with cases in the community, which will of course cause individuals to need to stay off work and school, and then for those cases to transfer into admissions to hospital. A decision today on certification.
We'll have more on the situation on the COVID-19 pandemic, but in the meantime, over in Belarus, an opposition leader who rallied mass protests against disputed leader Alexander Lukashenko has been jailed for 18 years. Sergei Tikhanovsky was convicted of organizing riots, among other charges, following a trial condemned as a sham. He planned to challenge Mr. Lukashenko in the 2020 presidential election, but was detained before the vote. His wife, Svetlana, took on Mr. Lukashenko, who claimed victory in the widely discredited poll. She claimed victory herself in the August election, but fearing for her safety, was forced into exile with her children the next day. At least 50 people have been killed after a fuel tanker explosion in northern Haiti. Reports say the vehicle was involved in an accident in the city of Kayak Parade, and the victims had been trying to gather leaking fuel when it ignited. Officials say local hospitals have been overwhelmed by those injured in the blast. The death toll is expected to rise. Prime Minister Ariel Henry says the nation is grieving after the accident and has declared 3 days of mourning. A car carrying migrants has crashed, killing 7 people in Hungary. The accident occurred after the driver tried to avoid a police check close to Hungary's border with Serbia. Police say they've arrested the Serbian driver, who was among 4 people hurt in the accident. Hungary is one of the main migrant transit routes into the EU from the Balkans and Eastern Europe. The accident just before midnight on Monday is the latest crash involving people trying to cross into the EU illegally. And back to our main story now, and that's the UK travel list. We have our correspondent, Juliana Olenka, joining us now. Juliana, what more can you tell us about this removal of 11 African countries from this list?
Good evening, Tenny. Hopefully you can hear me now, but goodness, yes. Well, Christmas has come early for hundreds of thousands of passengers and families across Africa who've been affected by these controversial measures that were put in place that have been described as a knee-jerk reaction from the British government, as well as other nations within the global north. Just earlier today, a couple of hours ago, the Health Secretary Sajid Javid made the announcement finally in the House of Commons that from tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. arrivals will no longer have to isolate in a government-approved quarantine hotel for 2 weeks, which was costing passengers £2,300. We've all seen those pretty shocking social media videos showing mouldy hotel rooms and improper food, but that's all to be scrapped. So from tomorrow, these measures will no longer be in place. Of course, as we know, because we've covered it extensively over the past couple of weeks, this measure really turned into a diplomatic row. We had some pretty strong language being put forward by the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, as well as the African Development Bank president and the Nigeria High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, describing these measures as travel apartheid. But according to the Health Secretary, considering that the Omicron variant is now pretty much everywhere, not just in Africa, these measures are no longer acceptable. So yes, Christmas has come early, and I think given the pretty strong turnaround from the British government, this probably would have dominated headlines tomorrow, Tenny. But as you know, we've got our own domestic issues here in the UK. There will be a Commons vote imminently on new measures that were put in place last week, and we have a by-election tomorrow that, if Boris Johnson's Conservative Party lose, could mean the Prime Minister could be out of number 10 within the coming weeks. Who would have thought that this time last year we'd be saying that?
Juliana, so much to keep our eyes on. Thank you so much for the update.
Thanks, Tenny.
Well, let's check in on the situation elsewhere around the world. Scientists in South Africa say the Pfizer vaccine is less effective against hospitalization. Plus, mainland China detects its first case of the Omicron variant. Here's the global update.
According to South African researchers, a two-dose Pfizer-BioNTech vaccination provides just 33% protection against infection by the Omicron variant of the coronavirus, but 70% protection against hospitalization. The first large-scale analysis of vaccine effectiveness in the region where the new variant was discovered appears to support early indications that Omicron is more easily transmissible and that the Pfizer shot isn't as effective in protecting against infection as it was against the Delta variant.
What is clear is that vaccinated individuals are experiencing milder infections in general, and that's supported by the data shown by the 70% effectiveness against severe illness, and also supported by anecdote where we're hearing that it's primarily the unvaccinated that are requiring admission and also that are requiring oxygen in hospital.
The 78,000 results are not confirmed Omicron cases, meaning the study cannot offer conclusive findings about the variant labeled of concern by the World Health Organization and now reported in more than 60 countries. Health authorities in northern China's port city of Tianjin have detected the first case of the Omicron coronavirus variant in the country's mainland. The infection was discovered in a traveler who arrived in the city from Europe. The patient is currently being treated in isolation in hospital. Singapore, which has vaccinated 96% of its eligible population, will allow up to 50% of workers currently working from home to return to their offices from January 1st. Officials are also urging the public to get booster shots amid concerns over the Omicron variant. Singapore has detected 16 Omicron cases so far. And over in Indonesia, the country has started administering COVID-19 vaccinations for children aged between 6 and 11. The Southeast Asian country is one of the first in the region to immunize the very young. And schools in the Netherlands will close a week early for Christmas this year as coronavirus infections remain high and hospitals struggle with a wave of COVID-19 patients. Infections in the country of 17.5 million have dropped from record levels following the introduction of the nighttime lockdown, but remain relatively high at around 85 per 100,000 inhabitants.
And over to the situation in Afghanistan. The United Nations says more than 100 former Afghan National Security Forces and others have been killed since the Taliban takeover in August. In a speech to the Human Rights Council, Nada al-Nashif, the UN Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, describes the Taliban rule as being marked by extrajudicial killings across the country and restrictions on women's and girls' basic rights.
In several cases, the bodies were publicly displayed. In Nangarhar province alone, there also appears to be a pattern of at least 50 extrajudicial killings of individuals suspected to be members of the ISIL-KP. Brutal methods of killings, including hanging, beheadings, and public display of corpses, have been reported. I am deeply concerned about the continued risk of recruitment of children by the ISIL-KP, as well as by the de facto authorities, with boys increasingly visible among security forces at checkpoints, as bodyguards, and in combat roles. Children also continue to comprise nearly all of the civilians killed and injured by unexploded ordnance.
Meanwhile, the UN's World Food Programme says almost all Afghans do not have enough to eat, and a failing economy could tip Afghanistan's increasingly dire situation under Taliban rule into catastrophe next year.
But the needs are quite enormous, and we have a huge amount to do to stop this crisis from becoming a catastrophe. Our country director describes the situation is quite dire. She says it's an avalanche of hunger and destitution.
Still to come on the program. UN confirms highest temperature ever recorded in the Arctic. We'll tell you what that is in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the United States will advance a free and open Indo-Pacific and deepen treaty alliances in defense and intelligence capabilities with partners in the region. During a visit to Indonesia, Blinken says that everyone has a stake in keeping the world's most dynamic region free from coercion and intimidation. Blinken is making his first visit to Southeast Asia since President Joe Biden took office in January, a trip aimed at shoring up relations amid growing Chinese influence. He will also visit Malaysia and Thailand later this week.
Work with our allies and partners to defend the rules-based order that we built together over decades to ensure the region remains open and accessible. And let me be clear about one thing. The goal of defending the rules-based order is not to keep any country down. Rather, it's to protect the right of all countries to choose their own path, free from coercion, free from intimidation. It's not about a contest between a U.S.-centric region or a China-centric region. The Indo-Pacific is its own region. Rather, it's about upholding the rights and agreements that are responsible for the most peaceful and prosperous period this region and the world has ever experienced. That's why there's so much concern, from Northeast Asia to Southeast Asia, and from the Mekong River to the Pacific Islands, about Beijing's aggressive actions.
A 7.4 magnitude earthquake has struck off the coast of Indonesia's South Sulawesi province, prompting people to evacuate homes and buildings. The earthquake happened around 10:30 a.m. in the Flores Sea. Officials say it affected the East Nusa Tenggara region. No injuries or major damage has been reported yet, but locals say they felt large tremors. Tsunami warnings for the area have also been lifted. The highest temperature ever recorded in the Arctic, 38 degrees Celsius, has been officially confirmed. The World Meteorological Organization verified the record reported in the Siberian town of Verkhoyansk in June last year. The temperature is 18 degrees Celsius higher than the area's average daily maximum for June. The WMO says the extreme heat is more befitting the Mediterranean than the Arctic and says it's sounding alarm bells. The death toll in Kentucky from a string of tornadoes that tore through 6 states has risen to 74, with at least 109 people still missing. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says he expects the number to increase as rescue workers continue to work. Meanwhile, scientists say the effect of climate change means that extreme weather events have been on the rise, while warmer temperatures also increases the threat of destructive tornadoes occurring all year round.
There were over 30 tornadoes that touched down Friday night, and that was one of the largest tornado outbreaks we've ever seen in December. And one of those tornadoes appeared to have been on the ground for at least 100 miles, maybe over 200, which would make it one of the longest, if not the longest, tracking tornado in history. So a very out-of-season sort of outbreak we had, and incredible destruction. Winter tornadoes are a big problem because it's dark so long in winter that you've got the darkness issue to contend with. People don't react as quickly when it's dark out as if they can actually see the storm coming. And then, like you said, they tend to be asleep. So the death toll is much higher when you get a nighttime tornado.
And now let's get the update from the Kentucky governor, giving an update on the death toll from the deadly tornadoes.
Estimate on deaths, and these are numbers coming from emergency management. They may differ a little bit from the coroner. There's one of these we're certainly checking on, is that we are now up to 74 Kentuckians that we have lost. One additional one in Graves since this morning. Looks like 4 additional in Hopkins, and this is one we are checking right now. I had 14. Emergency management came back with 17. I hope that the 14 is right. We expect that this death toll will continue to grow. 109 Kentuckians now unaccounted for, but as I look at this broken down by county, it's way more.
And finally, hundreds of kayaks decked with Christmas lights and decorations have lit up the winter darkness in central Copenhagen to celebrate St. Lucia's Day. Bystanders watch from streets and bridges around the city as around 700 kayaks moved along the canal for a parade to bring light into the darkness. At 4 stops along the route, the participants stopped off for some traditional singing. Apart from having to decorate the kayaks and to dress warmly should one fall into the darkness and cold water, the only rule was to have 360-degree visible lights on the kayaks.
We do it in kayaks because that's what we do. We do kayak, we do all kind of things in kayak activities, and our place is called Kayak Bar. But we choose to do Santa Lucia because, I mean, Santa Lucia is something that is bringing light to people in darkness, and we do live in a dark period right now where people are, you know, fighting for different reasons and not agree about so many different things, plus the winter and the darkness of the winter. So we really like to do Santa Lucia in Kayak Bar because our motto and our purpose to be here is to bring people together.
As it should be. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.